Hello and welcome to our Revenue Radio powered by Kassouf and Kassouf Healthcare Solutions, where we enhance the business of medicine. Today, our guest is Ramsey White from Innovative Billing Solutions, where he serves as the Vice President of Sales and Business Development. Ramsey, great to have you with us. We've had a great relationship between Kassouf Healthcare Solutions and yourself and Innovative Billing, and it's good to have you here today as we discuss using merchant services and maximizing payment solutions. It's a way that practice managers, practice owners in healthcare specifically can learn to navigate through those merchant services statements and learn how to use credit card and other online payment solutions and such. And we're going to be taking this through 2 episodes of Revenue Radio, and glad to have you back with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, super.
It's always exciting to work with Kassouf, and you guys are a great team. We work with a lot of revenue cycle companies, but it's always a pleasure working with you, Marty, and other people on the team.
Yeah, thanks.
It's really a good thing.
Yep, we've had Marty on the show before, and imparting her wisdom on those various items of the revenue cycle, and yours is crucial. Because it gives great access to the patient, their families, especially on the payer side, but not so much from an insurance standpoint, but once it gets to patient responsibility. And really, man, with all the COVID that has happened and just not so much the ability to be there in person and those over-the-counter collections that we like to talk about, your solutions are one to help generate the payments that we need, but also from a business standpoint, understanding now we got this merchant services statement that's coming in. We're not trying to figure out all these percentages. Should I change? How do I go about this? What do I need to do? What kind of technologies do I need to consider? So we're gonna look at that and dive into it. You're the subject matter expert.
I don't know about that.
We appreciate you being with us. And again, as I said, we do value our relationship with your organization and the guidance you bring to us, as we then can bring those and take that out to our clients. So let's get kicked off this morning, and let's talk a little bit about that merchant services statement, kind of what you guys do, what we see on the back end as practice managers and owners. Tell us a little bit about what we need to expect from a merchant services vendor or service provider.
Yeah, that's a great way to start this. So as I was making notes for what to talk about today, I thought, just to keep this really simple, that everyone has to take payments, okay? And everyone needs to collect in some way from those patients. So the way we do that is through merchant services. The use of credit cards is growing exponentially, especially with these high deductible plans. We're seeing a shift in payment responsibility is becoming a big part on the patient, as opposed to in the past when insurance was doing a majority of that. So obviously COVID changed a lot of things, and we got really busy. We actually got a lot of phone calls because if you think about it, insurance billables were going down. People weren't seeing as many patients. So now you have this AR asset sitting there, and people are calling saying, hey, we need to collect this as soon as possible. Merchant services makes that possible. Credit cards are a huge part of a medical practice, and there's so much new technology out there now that makes everything more integrated, makes it work more seamlessly with the practice management software. But the core of all of that is a merchant account. You have to have a merchant account to be able to do those things. So yeah, it's something that is really kind of becoming the lifeblood of a practice. Now, the way we get a lot of questions about those merchant statements, they are confusing. And sadly, the industry of merchant services has been notorious for very confusing statements.
Is that done on purpose?
It probably is. Because you don't know what you're paying.
I sure feel like it at times.
It really is. And we get so many calls from revenue cycle companies with their providers say, hey, can you tell me what I'm actually paying? So just kind of to simplify it, if you're looking at, okay, what am I actually paying for merchant services, we encourage our clients to look at the effective rate. What an effective rate is it takes in every single per item fee, every authorization fee, every monthly fee, and then you divide that by your sales that month, your credit card sales. And that creates a percentage of your holistic credit card picture. And just a general rule of thumb, if you're over 3%, there's something that you might want to look into. And what we've noticed is different specialties tend to be around the same percentages. So back office specialties like anesthesia or general surgery, a lot of their payments are not face-to-face. They're online or over the phone.
Right.
So the credit card companies, when it's not a face-to-face transaction, there's more risk that may not be a legitimate transaction. So because of that, those specialties actually are paying higher rates. Because if you think about the credit card companies like Visa, MasterCard, Discover, all the names that we know, their whole line of business is risk. We're funding things, we don't want to return them.
Right.
So typically with back office billing practices, we'll see around that 2.8 to even a 3.2% of their effective rate. Whereas, let's look at pediatricians. A lot of their payments are face-to-face. Co-pays, a lot of those vaccines are something insurance is covering a majority of. So they're mostly working with $40 co-pays. We see their rates under 2% because almost all of those transactions are face-to-face. It's less risk. If someone's handing you a card,
Right.
especially in a healthcare situation, you've got their driver's license, you've got their social, it's very likely that is a legitimate charge. So it's not uncommon, especially if patients are handing a lot of debit cards, to see even sometimes the practice is getting like 1.2 to 1.6%.
So let me make one disclaimer as we continue to move through this discussion. Any of the card vendors that we might reference in our discussion, purely for example only, and we're not casting any aspersions, dispersions,
No, they're all great.
whatever,
we love it.
For or against any of those, and
That's
just so that we're clear on that. Talk to us for a moment about, when we're setting this up, there's always that guarantor portion of an application. Wait a minute, what am I on the hook for?
Right.
Why am I signing this? It feels like I've got to pay something if something goes wrong. Can you kind of explain a little bit about how that happens on the front end?
Yeah, and actually, to answer your question, I got something that leads into that.
Okay,
but,
sure.
Part of that guarantor application, the owner of the merchant account has to provide their social, their date of birth, and their address. We get lots of questions about that. Why do I have to give that personal information? Well, after 9/11, there was the Patriot Act, and there was a lot of things in that.
Right.
But obviously, we were trying to prevent domestic terrorism. And one of the ways they're doing that is by avoiding external international funding through American merchant accounts. So on those merchant applications, they want to connect an individual with the business. An individual in the United States using a social or date of birth to that merchant account. They want to have that accountability there. That leads into the guarantor signature. When you open a merchant account, you are responsible for funding those things. For example, say that someone, we use TSYS as our processor.
Right.
So say TSYS or First Data, whoever your listeners are using for processing, they are funding those transactions and allowing that transaction to go through. And in return, the owner of the merchant account, the provider, the practice that's opened that account, they're responsible to pay their fees. So at the end of the month, when you have your merchant statement come through, there's going to be fees deducted for the service of allowing those credit card transactions to go
So
through.
the guarantor is more along the lines of guaranteeing
Yes.
that the fees will be paid.
They will pay the fees.
Right, and
Yes.
you're sort of the middle person entity between the user, which would be the practice,
Right.
and the processor.
Yes.
So who's really on the hook, or the underwriter, if you will, for these the actual credit card companies themselves, not so much TSYS or First Data?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's confusing because there's a lot of different players.
Sure.
So we have the bank.
Right.
We have
Which you're not.
We're not the bank. We
Okay.
are an agent.
Yes.
So we make
Okay.
everything work.
Right.
So anyone who wants healthcare patient payments, we make it all work. But there's a lot of different entities that make a transaction go through. There's the bank, there's the processor, there's the merchant account, which is connected to the provider, and it's all flowing back and forth, making sure that when that patient swipes the card, the funds are actually there, it's approved, and it's sent through back to the bank, and it's going to hit the provider's bank within 2 to 3 days. Now, let me give you an example, kind of an anecdote to who's responsible. So we had a client in Chattanooga who, they're an OBGYN practice. They set up a patient on a payment plan. And the patient signed something saying, I authorize this payment plan to draft on my card once a month. Well, the patient contacted Visa and said, I did not authorize that payment. Visa, without even, and again, not promoting or whatever, I'm just saying how it works.
Right.
Visa pulled those funds back from our client because the patient, the cardholder, disputed it. Well, then our client produced the form saying the patient did sign this, they authorized the payment, Visa refunded the clinic the payment. So there's lots of different people involved,
Right.
and it's confusing to say who at the end of the day is responsible. It's the cardholder,
Yep.
but the card issuers are going to side first with the cardholder. That's why it's really important to have receipts, to have documentation, to have a cloud-based reporting system that shows this transaction on this date took place
Right.
for this cardholder for this amount. And then obviously our clients have an EHR system that has services that were rendered on that day,
Yeah.
documentation.
Yeah, good, excellent. And that brings up that, I guess, category that you typically see is that chargeback.
Right.
That's what you're describing.
Yes.
Is when
It's a return.
Yeah, it's a disputed charge or return.
Yes.
And in healthcare, we don't necessarily have return services except for the fact that you might have credit balances where something from the adjudication process causes that to happen. Maybe some services like dermatology where you're prepaying on some items before you get, through the treatment and the procedures. And then those returns also carry a fee and a charge. Is that correct?
They do, and actually I get a lot of questions on that.
Yeah.
This happened actually this week. One of my clients reached out. They said, hey, someone who's not our patient paid us online. I'm like, wow, that is very rare that happens, but it did happen. And she asked, we're going to return it, but what fee are we paying for their mistake?
Right.
So I pulled it up and I said, it depends on the type of card they used, but it would be either $1.47 or if they used a certain type of debit card, 55 cents, which is pretty minimal. But when you return a transaction on a credit card, there is a fee associated with that because the credit card company, that's a transaction to them.
Right.
So it's very convenient to just refund it back on the same card. For accounting reasons, it's probably better to track the path of that return. But if you're trying to really watch those nickels and dimes, issuing a check would be the most cost-effective way.
We there's all kinds of things. Again, you see on these on these statements, interchange costs and things of that nature. Are those pretty typical? Should we be calling the agent and really walking through that each month, or
Right.
what's the kind of the knowledge base
Right.
that especially a new practice manager or a new practice owner?
Right.
A lot of we see a lot of practices now that are breaking out of the hospital ownership or the private equity. They finished that contract and now they want to kind of go back out on their own. They're contemplating all of that, and this whole credit card feature. Doctors are doctors, not bankers.
Right.
And we certainly want to help them understand that. So talk to us for a moment about some of those really intricate categories and things that they might see and need to understand as how it goes into that whole cost that you're mentioning earlier.
That's a great question, and I think the way it would be easiest to understand is you really have, most commonly, there's 4 different ways a provider is being charged. There's an interchange percentage, which is just every different credit card has a different cost. A lot of people don't know that. So there's a few different pricing models, but there's an interchange plus model, which is a cost plus model, which we love. It's so simple. It's so clear what you're paying. Doesn't matter what type of card comes in, you're only paying a cost markup on it. That's interchange plus. The second way that's very common is a 3-tiered pricing. There's a qualified charge, a non-qualified, and a mid-qualified. And that's where it gets really confusing. We actually don't, as our personal belief, we don't believe in doing that because it's really hard to know what cards are qualified. That's the best rate you could possibly get. So often we'll see people saying, hey, my merchant partner said I'm going to get 2% on qualified cards. But they don't know that, hey, only like 30% of the cards that your patients are using fall into that category.
Right.
That qualified may be 2.5%, but then the non-qualified could be up to 4%. So you really need to look at what's my pricing model. We love Interchange Plus. I recommend everyone do that. If your merchant partner refuses, there's a reason.
And when you say merchant partner, you're talking about
your agent, whoever
that would be
is someone
Yeah.
like an Innovative Billing, whoever's facilitating your merchant services that you sign agreements with. They would be the ones to establish that interchange or that 3-tier pricing. Just to give you some examples, and these are examples, there's so many different types of cards, but a regulated Visa debit card, like a major bank that you have a checking account with, and they give you a debit card. The cost on that card can be as low as 0.05. So that is, our clients love getting debit cards because usually it's a really good rate. But let's consider like an airline's rewards card. A lot of people don't know that that rate's going to be higher because you're actually paying for that patient's rewards through your merchant services. The cost on that card is going to be higher. It can be up to 1.15, 1.5 for that rewards, depending if it's like a tier 3, platinum card. It can be even higher. So it's really important that you know, hey, no matter what the card is, I'm only paying this percent.
And if I'm a cash type business, say plastic surgery or some of those specialties where you've got a particular clientele that's going to have a particular card pattern, if you will, that's going to hit pretty high. So should those fees get passed back to the patient? I say should. That's a kind of a closed-ended question.
I've been getting that question a lot recently, and actually, what kind of sparked it was inflation, because a lot of our practices did not increase their cost structure of different services. So now they're thinking, okay, how can we find revenue without passing it on through our services? You can offer a convenience fee, and we don't see it a lot, but it is an option where you can't call it a credit card pass-through. You're not allowed to do that, but you could have a convenience fee that passes on some of those cost to your business, to the patient. Now, I will say, as you're considering that, it's not wrong to do that. A lot of people need to consider it. But I like to reward patients who are paying us. I don't want to penalize patients who are paying us.
Right.
So I would say if there's a different way you could do it, maybe if you are on a cash basis, maybe just increasing the cost of the service. I think that it'd be received better. But no, it's not wrong. You can definitely have a convenience fee if you want.
We see a lot of, or I'll say a lot, an increasing number of these virtual credit cards from institutions now that are sending those over as a form of payment.
Right.
How should a practice, again, may not have seen too many of them, you start to see that a lot in direct invoicing and maybe workers' comp, some of that type of practice structure. Does that work through the regular credit card processing?
Yes.
Is there an additional fee? How should I consider that versus a check? What are your thoughts along virtual credit cards?
I say take them if you can.
Yeah. I think some of my colleagues would argue that point because they want to maximize as much of that cash. I kind of look at it as a time value of money situation, but
yeah, and we're actually seeing more of that with on the payer side, like third tier, maybe smaller payers prefer to use a virtual credit card. What's interesting about that type of payment is it's a business to business transaction, whereas opposed to business to consumer through a chip card reader at the front desk.
Right.
So I encourage people who are seeing more of those to maybe look at a level 3 option on your merchant account. What level 3 does is it asks for a little bit more information from that business to give you a better credit card rate. Sometimes it's a address that's connected with the card. It could be an invoice number, or in this healthcare example, an account number in that field. A lot of times with level 3, they're not even checking that information matches something. They just want to see that it's filled.
Right.
Sometimes you can even get up to 1% better by having that information.
Are those virtual credit cards, we hear some about the credit card on file process.
Right.
That's probably more on the patient side. So the institution is going to issue a new number each time. Correct.
It's a one-time payment.
Yeah. Okay.
So I know, especially with our really cost-sensitive clients, I would encourage your payers to ACH you, if you can. Way less on the fees. Some people don't have that option, but it's good to encourage them to do it. If we're really trying to get those fees down, ACH is the best way. It's the same exact thing, except we're using a bank account and a routing number instead of a credit card number with an expiration date and a 3-digit code on the back. But yes, those are one-time credit cards. So credit card on file, if you tried it, wouldn't really work because that's a one-time payment. It's not going to let you rerun it. Yeah.
I want to save our technology questions. We're going to have you back for another episode.
Okay, cool.
And I want to kind of save the technology because that's the cool.
Yeah, that's the fun stuff.
Yeah. So this is the good long division right before we get into how to do the short way.
Right.
I understand that there can be additional or a different charge structure, cost structure from the swiping versus the actual keying in of the number.
Yes.
And I know there's all kinds of security issues, and we got Russ here who is InfraGard and security organization. He just perked up when I said security and such. And I know there's the whole write it down and try to go punch it in and such. So we don't want to hit that too hard today because that's not the direction. But I want to stay more in the cost and maximizing the revenue and income for a practice. Are there different fee structures as to swiping versus punching in the number, as they say down in some of the rural areas mash it.
Yeah.
You know, what should we consider and know about that
Right.
as far as ease of use and how it fits into our cost
Yeah.
at a practice?
Great question. So yes, there are. We're really talking about card present transactions in the form of a chip reader or a swipe, and then card not present transactions. Those are over the phone transactions. And again, we're coming back to risk here. You know, it's all about risk and mitigating risk. When you take a payment face to face, typically it's 0.5% better on the cost, which over a year could be substantial. But it's some of our practices don't have that ability. They have to take payments over the phone, especially with anesthesia clients.
Right.
Patients don't even know who they are.
Right.
They don't have an office. So they're kind of, unfortunately, they have to take payments that way.
So if you're in that type of specialty, you just need to kind of consider that
It's what it is.
That's a cost of business I need to think through.
Now, there are some best practices that can help
Right.
minimize that. One is when the patient gives you a debit or credit card, confirming the address connected to that card matches what you're inputting into your virtual terminal. If it matches, you do get a better rate. Again, less likely it's a fraudulent charge.
Right.
So there are things you can do, and I just encourage everyone to make a habit of doing that.
Yeah.
You know, let's match the name on the card with the address, because again, if someone disputes that charge and you can show the address matches, it's more likely you can actually win that case.
Sure. Good. Well, Ramsey, it's been a great conversation with you. Thanks for being
Thanks
here
for having
with
me.
us.
It's been a blast.
Tell us real quick how any of our listeners can get in contact with you to ask questions or consider how their merchant services costs need to be evaluated.
Yeah, well, people can reach out to us on our website. We have a contact us section, or you can call us. We're located in Homewood, Alabama, but we have clients all over the United States. And honestly, if you just have a question about, hey, what am I doing? Am I doing best practices? We're happy to answer those questions.
Okay. All right.
So yeah.
So what's your website?
It's https colon
the security in
//
there.
It's secure now.
That's right.
It's innbill.com.
Very good.
So inbill.com.
All right. Super. Well, thank you again, Ramsey, for being with us. To all of our listeners and the participants on our Revenue Radio, we thank you for your time being with us today. And we hope you've learned a few pointers on maximizing your revenue in your medical practice. So again, this is Jeff Dance, Executive Director at Kassouf Healthcare Solutions. We are glad that you're on our Revenue Radio that's powered by Kassouf and Kassouf Healthcare Solutions, where we enhance the business of medicine. Thank you and have a great day.